extend it. What I would say to borrowers is that we are taking action on multiple fronts to help them in light of the Supreme Court opinion today. There's the 12-month on-ramp to repayment, which is going to be a real benefit to borrowers who may be having trouble getting started again on their repayments and who may have to skip a payment or two because they need to get their financial situation together. Previously, they may have been put into delinquency or default or seen a negative mark on their credit report. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen for the first 12 months, so that's a real benefit to those borrowers. And as the Secretary said, and I don't want people sleeping on this, this income-based repayment plan that we're rolling out today that was finalized is a huge deal. It is going to save the typical borrower $1,000 a year on their loan repayments. Somebody who is making $50,000, $60,000 a year is going to see a substantial savings and may even end up paying $0 in their monthly payment because of this new program. And by the way, one concern that people have had about the income-based repayment program in the past is that if you were making these smaller payments, your balance would keep growing over time. One of the reforms we're putting in place is making sure that that balance doesn't grow over time, even as you are making potentially a $0 payment each month. It is a big deal for both current borrowers and for all the future borrowers who are out there. Now, I want to be clear, that's not a substitute for debt relief, but it is a huge benefit for borrowers that is going to be available coming this summer. And we encourage people to sign up for it.
You talked about the timeline on this. It sounds like it's going to take a long time. Is the administration taking any steps to speed up the regulatory process, shorten deadlines, waiving the typical public comment requirements?
Well, there are requirements that are laid out in the law that we have to follow. But we are committed to doing those requirements as quickly as we possibly can while keeping with the spirit of the law. Like I said, we have to do these public hearings. There has to be a certain amount of preparation to do the public hearings. You have to intake the comments that you get from the public, and then you have to decide whether to change your proposal accordingly before you do the next public hearing. All of that takes some amount of time. But as the Secretary made clear, as the President made clear, we are doing that as quickly as we possibly can, starting with the fact that we've already initiated the process today in just the handful of hours since the Supreme Court issued its opinion.
Has the administration considered an executive order that would lower interest rates for these federal loans?
We looked at a number of possibilities. The President's direction to us was to look at all available legal authorities to figure out what we can do to provide relief to borrowers. The specific proposal that you discussed was not the one that we went with eventually. We think that this pathway that we have laid out here is the fastest way to provide the relief to the most amount of borrowers. And so that's what we're going with now. We think it's legally available, and we look forward to providing that relief to borrowers as soon as this process is done.
Yeah, Tam, and then we'll go back.
Are you on totally solid legal footing with the income-based repayment changes, or could there be lawsuits challenging that as well?
No, that authority is crystal clear. There's a specific statute allowing the Secretary to design these income-based repayment programs, and the specific details of this income-based repayment program are clearly within what's permitted under the statute there. And so I would be surprised, frankly, if there was a legal challenge to that proposal.
And you say it's not a substitute, obviously, for debt forgiveness. Are there, and I think this is a known answer, so I'm sorry for even asking it, but like, how big is the universe of people who don't qualify for the income-based repayment who just aren't going to be covered by this exciting thing you just offered?
Sure. Every single borrower is eligible for this program. Now, the key is that if you're an extremely high-income borrower, your income may be so high that the specific benefit where you cap your payment at a percentage of your income doesn't actually benefit you because that percentage is still higher than what your monthly payment would be. But it stretches pretty far up the income spectrum so that the kinds of folks who are eligible for the initial debt relief program we're talking about, people making $75,000, $80,000 a year, are certainly going to benefit from this.
Thank you. The opinion touches on the President's authority to act without specific permission from Congress. It cites several opinions that I know have tripped up Biden administration policies over the last couple of years. Can you talk about how you see this opinion moving forward, applying in other areas of policy making that you do?
Well, look, I think that is kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? When the HEROES Act says that the Secretary can waive or modify a provision, it seems to me that that is very clear about what the Secretary's authorities are. It is a broad grant of authority from Congress that it was expecting the Secretary to be acting in an emergency situation. There's also a very broad grant of authority in the Higher Education Act, which talks about the Secretary having the ability to settle or compromise debts. Look, I think that even the Supreme Court would say that this doctrine is evolving. It is something that was invented very recently, and it has already changed, in our view, in this opinion compared to the last opinion in which it came up, so we'll need to keep an eye on it. But from where it stands now, we think that the settlement and compromise pathway, the Higher Education Act pathway that we talked about today, is going to be a valid pathway that conforms with the major questions doctrine issue that the Supreme Court raised today.
Do you see this doctrine continuing to be an obstacle to different goals that you have moving forward?
Well, it seems to be intended to place restrictions on what the executive branch can do in certain situations, even when, in our view, Congress speaks clearly about what the executive branch can and can't do. We have to take that at face value, and as we evaluate the availability of certain administrative actions going forward, we'll have to weigh how it would stand up against that new doctrine that the Supreme Court has issued. But again, we think that the pathway that we're choosing here, the Higher Education Act, is available even with this doctrine in place.
Thank you.
Secretary Cardona, are you considering potentially raising the income threshold for those $0 monthly payments on the IDRs, or is that $33,000 annual number set in stone henceforth?
It is $33,000, and I want to make it very clear to the folks that are paying attention to this, that maybe don't know the details of it. The income-driven repayment plan that we talked about today, SAVE, we're calling it SAVE, will cut in half loan payments for undergraduate students. So think about the students that said, I can't go to college because I can't afford the $600, $700. Those are going to be cut in half. It's going to open doors to higher education. For folks making less than $33,000, which is your question, their threshold, the threshold of payment is higher than the $33,000. So if you're making less than $33,000, you won't have a payment.
Is the IRS, or who's going to be monitoring whether people are still making that number moving forward?
Did you want to take that?
Yeah, as part of the program, you have to submit your tax return. So it monitors it on an annual basis. And I think there's actually an obligation that if your income changes significantly, you have to provide an update.
From a practical perspective, the millions who've already applied to the program that now has been blocked, I noticed the president was encouraging people to still sign up. So is the thinking that that could just be transferred to the new regulation once that's set up, or how will that work?
Yeah, again, I know this is not particularly satisfying, but it is too early to say because we haven't completed the rulemaking process yet. It is clearly the case that, in just a handful of days, I think maybe a little bit over a week that the website was available, we had an incredible rush of interest. You had 16 million people go to the website, fill out the form, and indicate that they were eligible for debt relief. As the president's remarks made clear today, he certainly feels for all of the 40 million borrowers, but especially those 16 million who went through the process and got a notification saying you are going to get your debt relief, only to have Republican officials and the courts step in and block that. But no, it's not. It's premature to say whether those people are necessarily going to be at the front of the line or anything like that in a new process.
For months, the White House had said they felt confident about the law being on their side, but then also, of course, you guys were preparing different scenarios, as we've now learned. So what were you bracing for today? How surprised were you both about this outcome, or is this really what you expected given some of the work that was put into the contingency?
Look, let me read. The Secretary has the right to waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision in the form deemed appropriate by the Secretary to offset national emergency. That was the legal authority. What I want to remind folks is we got a decision from SCOTUS. I think it's the wrong decision. 43 million people were waiting for some relief, like some others have gotten in the form of PPP loan forgiveness. That didn't happen. Within hours, we started the regulatory process. We're not going to stop fighting. This president's been very clear. The vice president's been very clear. We're going to put borrowers first. We're going to put students first. And the president someone made reference to when the president asked folks to go online. Public service loan forgiveness went from 7,000 people from 2017 to 2021. We're at 600,000 people now in 2 years. We're fighting for students. We're fighting for access, for higher education. We're going to continue to do that. And we're going to do that. We're going to do that based on a legal footing. We recognize that this decision today, we had to really very carefully to make sure we know which path we're going to go forward. But the bottom line is the president is going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to fight. Higher education should be accessible to more people, and that's what we're going to be fighting for. Thank you.
The secretary has to go because he has to catch a
Yeah.
flight, so I'm going to let him go.
Thank you.
Bharat, do you mind staying just for a couple more questions?
You're just listening in there as we're talking about this recent decision by the Supreme Court there as Karine Jean-Pierre was about to take the podium. We'll get you right back out to that right here on Live Now from Fox. But I do want to give you an update out of Chicago as we continue to monitor that NASCAR race that was supposed to take place there in the streets of the Windy City. It was going to be a very exciting weekend, but ultimately it is being called. They had an option to postpone it until Monday, but that won't be the case as Cole Custer, taking the official checkered flag, declared the winner there of this race in downtown Chicago, the Xfinity race on the Chicago streets, as Custer earned the pole position on Saturday's qualifying session, led each of the 25 laps completed. NASCAR rules state a race is ruled official either at its halfway mark or at the conclusion of stage 2, whichever comes first. In this instance, lap 28 would have been signified halfway and deemed the event official. However, because of the unique circumstances surrounding the street course, officials chose to instead rule the Xfinity Series race complete. They said in a statement, with standing water and flooding a significant issue at the racetrack and throughout the city, there was no option to return to racing prior to shifting to NASCAR Cup Series race operations. Throughout the entire planning process for the Chicago street race, our relationship with the city of Chicago has been strong and among the most valuable assets in reaching this historic weekend. In the spirit of that partnership, returning on Monday for the completion of a NASCAR Xfinity Series event 2 laps short of halfway was an option we chose not to employ based on several unprecedented circumstances. NASCAR has made the decision to declare Cole Custer the winner of the race. So just short of halfway, but returning to action on Monday in that major city was just not an option. You can see the clouds, the rain still there over the Chicago River, just a little bit there, River North, but the rain still moving through. They weren't able to make it happen over the weekend. As you can see, our X-Rad computer weather monitor as well. Still rain in the Windy City there. As they're dealing with this, they would have to dry out the course, make sure everything was safe, and also get fans back in around that course. So that would be a difficult task to undertake here on this Sunday, on this holiday weekend. I'm Andy Mack. You're on Live Now from Fox. Let's slide away for a quick 2-minute break.
Have you seen the price of eggs? We're going to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's a random act of helpfulness.